Krathzar stepped forward into the center of the command center. Every being in the room watched him. Marcus could barely breathe. The fate of billions of humans rested on what his friend would say next. War Leader Tharkin, Honored War Council, Krathzar began. His voice was formal, ritualistic. I have observed the species called human for many weeks. I have studied their ways. I have fought beside one of them. I have been saved by one of them. And I must speak truth as our code demands. Krathzar turned to face his fellow Karvathi. Our people have a saying. The strong survive. The weak perish. This has guided us for 10,000 years. We have conquered worlds. We have never known defeat. We are warriors without equal. Marcus felt his heart sink. This sounded like Krathzar was going to vote against humanity. But Krathzar continued, and the single word echoed through the chamber. In all our strength and all our victories, what have we gained? We rule through fear. We stand alone in the galaxy. Every species flees from us. We have no allies. Only subjects and enemies. Tharkin's eyes narrowed, but he didn't interrupt. Humans are weak by our standards, Krathzar said. They have no natural weapons. No armor, they can be killed easily. But they have something we lack. They have the strength to be vulnerable, the courage to admit fear while acting anyway, the wisdom to seek connection instead of conquest. Krathzar looked at Marcus. My shield brother is small. He could not defeat me in combat. He could not match my strategic training. He has no great weapons to offer. But he walked toward me when all others ran. He risked his life to save mine. He showed me that strength comes in forms I never imagined. The War Council stirred, some in agreement, others in anger. Krathzar raised his upper right hand for silence. I vote that humanity has passed our trials. But I vote for more than that. Krathzar's voice grew stronger. I propose that the Karvathi Empire form an alliance with the Coalition, with humanity serving as the bridge between our peoples. We have much to learn from them, and perhaps they have something to learn from us. Impossible, one of the War Council shouted. We do not make alliances. We conquer or we ignore. There is no third path. Then perhaps it is time we create one, Krathzar said. For 10,000 years we have followed the same way. It has made us strong, but it has also made us alone. I have experienced something different these past weeks. I have experienced friendship, trust, connection without hierarchy. And I tell you, my brothers, it is not weakness. It is a different kind of strength. Tharkin was silent, his ancient eyes studying Krathzar. Finally he spoke. You speak of changing our most fundamental beliefs. You ask us to abandon the way of our ancestors. No, Krathzar said. I ask us to evolve. Strength is not weakness, but neither is growth. The universe changes. Species that refuse to change with it become extinct. We are warriors. We survive. To survive, we must adapt. The War Council erupted in argument. Half supported Krathzar's words. Half condemned them as heresy. Voices rose. For a moment, Marcus feared they would come to blows. Then Marcus did something incredibly stupid. He stepped between them. The War Council fell silent, shocked that this small human had dared to interrupt them. Marcus's voice shook, but he spoke anyway. War Leader Tharkin, Honored Council, I'm just a maintenance engineer. I fix broken things, and right now I see something that's broken. Explain, Tharkin said dangerously. You're trying to force a choice between your old ways and a completely new path. But that's not how humans think. We don't throw away what works just because we find something new. We combine them. Marcus gestured to both sides of the War Council. Some of you want to maintain your warrior traditions. Some of you want to explore alliance. Why not do both? How? Asked one of the War Council who had supported Krathzar. A pilot program, Marcus said. The idea was forming as he spoke. Let those Karvathi who want to explore cooperation join the coalition for a trial period. 5 years. Let those who want to maintain your current ways continue as before. After 5 years, you evaluate the results. No permanent commitment, no betrayal of your traditions. Just an experiment. And if the experiment fails, Tharkin asked, then you have your answer. You tried something new and it didn't work. No harm done. Marcus paused. But if it succeeds, you've opened a door to something your people have never experienced. Partnership, alliance, friendship. The War Council looked at each other. Marcus could see them processing this idea. It wasn't surrender. It wasn't abandonment of their ways. It was just trying something different to see what happened. This is acceptable, Tharkin said slowly. It honors both tradition and innovation. Those who wish to explore this alliance may do so. Those who wish to maintain the warrior path may continue. We will reconvene in 5 years to assess the results. He turned to Krathzar. You will lead those who choose this new path. They will follow you as their war leader. You will be responsible for their success or failure. Krathzar touched his fist to his chest in salute. I accept this honor and this burden. Tharkin looked at Marcus. And you, small human. You have shown courage beyond your size, wisdom beyond your years. You have earned the respect of the Karvathi War Council. This is rare. Treasure it. I will, Marcus said. Thank you. The War Council departed, taking half the fleet with them. The other half remained, along with Krathzar and 200 Karvathi warriors who had chosen to follow him on this new path. They called themselves the Pathwalkers, those who would walk between the warrior way and the way of alliance. The galaxy watched in amazement. The species that everyone feared was splitting, not through war but through choice. It was unprecedented. It was revolutionary. And it all started because one human maintenance engineer had chosen to walk toward a giant alien warrior instead of running away. 5 years passed. Station Meridian 7 transformed completely. The Pathwalker Karvathi integrated into coalition life, though they maintained their warrior culture and pride. They trained coalition security forces, sharing combat techniques in exchange for learning about negotiation and diplomacy. Human engineers worked alongside Karvathi shipwrights, combining human creativity with Karvathi durability to create new ship designs that served both peoples. The recreation area that had once been empty was now the busiest place on the station. Species that used to fear each other now gathered there to learn from one another. The chess tables were always full. Karvathi warriors learned human games. Humans learned Karvathi meditation techniques. Zenthari scientists discussed theories with Karvathi strategists. Marcus was no longer just a maintenance engineer, though he insisted on keeping the job. He was now the official cultural liaison between humans and Karvathi, a role that basically meant he continued doing what he had always done, talking to people, fixing problems, and reminding everyone that underneath all the differences, they were all just people trying to survive in a big, scary universe. Krathzar thrived as leader of the Pathwalkers. Young Karvathi from the traditional empire began requesting transfers to his group, curious about this different way of being strong. The War Council watched carefully, but even they had to admit that the Pathwalkers were succeeding. They had formed alliances with a dozen species. They had resolved conflicts through negotiation that would have required war under the old ways. They were proving that strength and diplomacy could coexist. On the 5th anniversary of the trials, Marcus and Krathzar sat in that same recreation area, playing their weekly chess game. It had become a tradition. Every week, no matter how busy they were, they met here. Sometimes other species joined them. Sometimes they played in silence. Either way, it was their time. Check, Marcus said. Moving his knight, Krathzar studied the board. He had gotten good at chess over the years. I see it. He moved his king to safety. You are distracted today, Shield Brother. Your game is not as focused as usual. Marcus smiled. There's a new species arriving today. The Vraxian Collective. They're supposed to be pretty aggressive. Very militaristic. The Coalition Council is nervous. And you? Krathzar asked. I'm curious. Marcus moved his bishop. Sound familiar? Krathzar made the rumbling sound that was his version of laughter. Very familiar. Shall we greet them together? I was hoping you'd say that. They finished their game, which Krathzar won for once, and walked to the docking bay. A crowd had gathered, mostly station security and nervous diplomats. The Vraxian ship was large and covered in weapons. Marcus could see why everyone was worried. The Vraxians emerged from their ship. They were 8 feet tall with 6 arms and armor that looked even tougher than Karvathi chitinous plates. Their leader stepped forward, scanning the crowd with suspicious eyes. Everyone backed away. Marcus took a breath and walked forward. Behind him, he heard Krathzar's heavy footsteps. They approached the Vraxian leader together, a human and a Karvathi side by side. Welcome to Station Meridian 7, Marcus said. I'm Marcus Webb. This is Krathzar. Can we help you find your quarters? The Vraxian leader stared at them. Marcus could see the confusion in the creature's eyes. A small human and a giant Karvathi, standing together without fear. It didn't match what the Vraxians expected. "You are not afraid?" the Vraxian asked. Marcus looked at Krathzar. His friend looked back. They both smiled. "We're terrified," Marcus said honestly. The fortress world of Drazen Prime burned in the void. Admiral Vectel watched from the observation deck of the evacuation ship, his 4 eyes reflecting the orange glow of a dying civilization. Below, the last stronghold of the Drazen Federation crumbled under the relentless assault of the Vextharn. The enemy moved like liquid shadow across the planet's surface, consuming everything in their path. "How long?" Vectel asked, his translator converting his clicks and whistles into standard galactic. 4 hours until planetary core breach, replied. His tactical officer, a insectoid Quellan whose compound eyes showed no emotion. "The Vextharn are using pattern Delta 9, same as they used against the Architects 50 years ago." Vectel's chest sacs deflated in what humans might call a sigh. 200 years. For 2 centuries, the Vextharn had swept across the galaxy like a plague. They didn't want territory. They didn't want resources. They simply erased civilizations from existence methodically and completely. Every species that stood against them fell within months. The Drazen had lasted the longest, nearly 30 years of continuous warfare. Their technology was superior to anything the galaxy had ever seen. Their military academies were legendary. Their fleet commanders were tactical geniuses. None of it mattered. The Vextharn learned. They adapted. They evolved their tactics faster than any biological mind could counter. The evacuation ship jumped to hyperspace, leaving Drazen Prime to its fate. Vectel made his way to the command center, where the Galactic Remnant Council was already assembling via holographic projection. 17 species, all that remained of the once great galactic community. 17 species that had learned to run instead of fight. "The Drazen have fallen," Vectel announced to the council. No one looked surprised. They had all watched their own worlds burn. "That leaves us with what?" asked Counselor Thresh, a crystalline architect whose body chimed softly with each word. 43 colony worlds, 12 billion souls scattered across the outer rim. We cannot run forever." "We cannot fight either," countered Counselor Mirash, speaking for the Quellan Collective. "Every battle plan fails. Every strategy crumbles. The Vextharn adapt to our tactics within days, sometimes hours." The council chamber fell silent. They had been over this 1,000 times. The Vextharn were not just strong. They were a learning algorithm made flesh, a hive mind that absorbed every lesson from every battle. Fight them with overwhelming force and they learned to counter overwhelming force. Use guerrilla tactics, and they developed anti-guerrilla protocols. Deploy superweapons, and they evolved defenses against those specific weapons. A junior analyst, a young Drazen named Keth, cleared his throat nervously. "May I speak?" Vectel gestured permission. Let the youth say his piece. They had nothing left to lose. "I have been studying our military database," Keth said, his voice shaking slightly. "Looking for patterns we might have missed, and I found something strange." He pulled up a star chart on the main display. "This species, the humans, they were granted provisional membership status 30 years ago after achieving faster-than-light travel." "So?" Thresh's crystalline body flickered with impatience. "What does a primitive species matter to us now?" "That's just it," Keth continued, growing bolder. "I reviewed their first contact files. According to the survey teams, humanity achieved FTL technology while simultaneously fighting 3 separate wars on their home planet. They were killing each other even as they reached for the stars." The council members shifted uncomfortably. Warfare during space-age development was unusual but not unheard of. "But it gets stranger," Keth said, his scales flushing with excitement or fear. "I accessed their cultural database. Humans have detailed records going back 10,000 years. In that time, they have fought over 15,000 documented wars. 15,000. They have never known true peace. Even now with the Vextharn, threat known to them, their military is divided into dozens of factions that were enemies just decades ago. A fractured primitive species," Mirash said dismissively. "How does this help us?" Vectel stared at the data scrolling across the screen. Something about it bothered him. 15,000 wars. That meant humanity had developed 15,000 different ways to fight. 15,000 tactical doctrines, 15,000 military philosophies. Pull up their engagement history, Vectel ordered. Keth complied, displaying a timeline that made several council members recoil. In the last 500 years alone, humanity had refined warfare into an art form. They fought in trenches and from the sky. They used chemical weapons and precision strikes. They deployed massive armies and tiny special forces units. They fought total wars and limited engagements. They used propaganda and psychological operations. They developed guerrilla warfare, conventional warfare, nuclear warfare, cyber warfare, and forms of combat the translator couldn't even properly render into galactic standard. They are barbaric, Thresh stated flatly. They are adaptable, Vectel corrected, his mind racing. Look at this. In their 20th century alone, they fought 2 planetary conflicts using completely different tactics. Then they spent the next 70 years fighting dozens of smaller wars, each one different from the last. They don't have one military doctrine. They have hundreds. You cannot be suggesting what I think you're suggesting, Counselor Mirage said, her collective voice carrying notes of disbelief. Vectel turned to face the council. The Vextharn defeat us because they learn our tactics. But what if they encountered an enemy with no single tactic to learn? An enemy that fights differently every time? An enemy whose very nature is chaos and unpredictability? That's insane, Thresh said. We would be asking primitives to save us. We're asking dead civilizations to save us if we do nothing, Vectel shot back. I say we extend an invitation to Earth. We show them what we face, and we ask them to send their best. The debate raged for 6 hours. Some counselors called it desperation. Others called it suicide. But in the end, they voted. The measure passed by a single vote. 3 weeks later, a human ship dropped out of hyperspace at the coordinates provided. Vectel watched it approach Bastion Station with growing confusion. The vessel was large, roughly cruiser class by galactic standards, but it looked wrong. The hull was a patchwork of different alloys and materials. The weapon systems were mounted at odd angles. The engine configuration violated at least a dozen basic principles of efficient design. They sent us junk, Thresh said with disgust. But Vectel noticed something else. The ship moved with purpose, its approach vector perfect, despite its ungainly appearance. And as it grew closer, he could read the name painted on its hull in bold human letters. UNSC Indomitable. Junk doesn't choose its own name, Vectel murmured. The communication channel crackled to life. A human face appeared on screen, female, with dark hair pulled back tight and eyes that looked like they had seen too much. She wore a uniform covered in patches and insignias that meant nothing to the Council. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Nations Space Command vessel Indomitable, she said in clear galactic standard, though her accent was strange. We received your invitation. Permission to dock? Granted, Vectel replied. Captain Chen, welcome to Bastion Station. We have much to discuss. I'm sure we do, Chen said, and something in her smile made Vectel's blood run cold. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just spotted prey. I've read your tactical reports on the Vextharn. Very thorough, very detailed, very civilized. She paused and her smile widened. Let me show you how we fight back home. The distress call came from mining colony Theta 7, a small operation on the edge of remnant space. 3,000 souls, mostly civilian. The Vextharn had found them. Standard attack pattern, reported the Indomitable's tactical officer, studying the sensor data. They're deploying Harvester-class vessels, 6 of them. Colony has maybe 4 hours before complete erasure. Captain Sarah Chen sat in her command chair, fingers drumming against the armrest. Around her, the bridge crew worked in controlled chaos, speaking in half a dozen languages. Response time for remnant fleet? 12 hours at best, came the reply. So the colony dies if we follow protocol. Chen smiled that predator smile that made her crew grin and aliens nervous. Good thing we're not following protocol. Helm plot intercept course. Maximum burn. I want us there in 90 minutes. Captain, we're one ship against 6 harvesters, her XO cautioned. The tactical database says each harvester carries enough firepower to crack a moon. The tactical database also says you're supposed to engage them with balanced fleet formations and overwhelming force, Chen replied. Yuki, what have you got on harvester vulnerabilities? Science Officer Tanaka pulled up her analysis. They're heavily armored on all sides. Multiple redundant systems. They adapt their shields based on incoming fire within seconds. Every species that's fought them used the same approach, sustained bombardment from range. What about close range? Chen asked. No one's tried it. Getting close to a harvester is considered suicide. Perfect, Chen said. They won't expect it then. Load the torpedoes with conventional explosives. I want our railguns loaded with solid slugs, no energy weapons. We're going old school. Admiral Vechtel's face appeared on the communication screen, his 4 eyes wide with alarm. Captain Chen, our sensors show you're moving to intercept the Vextharn force alone. This is madness. Wait for reinforcements. We can't do that, Admiral. Those people will be dead before reinforcements arrive. Chen stood, buttoning her uniform jacket. Besides, I need to test a theory. What theory? Whether the Vextharn have ever fought anyone truly crazy before, Chen said. Indomitable out. The ship dropped out of hyperspace 3 million kilometers from the colony. The 6 Vextharn harvesters were already in position, their dark organic hulls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns. They detected the Indomitable immediately and began forming their standard defensive formation. They're adapting to our presence, Tanaka reported, calculating optimal engagement range based on our weapon signatures. Not today, they're not, Chen said. Kill our main engines. Let us drift, and Captain? You heard me. Kill the engines. Make it look like we had a malfunction. The Indomitable went dark, coasting on momentum toward the Vextharn formation. The enemy vessels hesitated, their collective consciousness uncertain. This didn't match any previous encounter pattern. They're scanning us, Tanaka said, trying to determine if we're a threat. Chen counted silently to 30. Now, full burn directly at the nearest harvester. All weapons free. Ram them if we have to. The Indomitable roared to life, engines flaring white-hot as it accelerated directly toward the enemy. The Vextharn scattered, their formation breaking. They had adapted to counter long-range engagement, not a suicidal charge. Firing railguns, called the weapons officer. Solid tungsten slugs, moving at a fraction of light speed, punched through the harvester's shields. The Vextharn had learned to adapt to energy weapons, but simple kinetic projectiles were too basic, too primitive to be expected. Torpedoes away, Chen ordered. Make them think about dodging instead of shooting. The Indomitable wove through space like a drunk driver. Random course changes and unpredictable acceleration. The Vextharn tried to target them, but their weapon systems were designed for enemies that fought logically. That maintained formation and distance. We're in knife-fighting range, the XO said, voice tight with tension. Deploy boarding teams, Chen commanded. Ma'am, you heard me. Suit up every Marine we have. We're going inside. The Indomitable pulled alongside a damaged harvester, matching velocity through a series of rapid thruster burns. Airlock doors blew open and 40 human Marines in EVA suits launched themselves into space, magnetic grapples securing them to the enemy hull. Inside the harvester, the Marines moved through corridors of living organic matter, the walls pulsing with alien life. The Vextharn defenders came at them in waves, but the humans fought like nothing the hive mind had ever encountered. They used close combat weapons, knives and clubs alongside guns. They set traps in corridors. They destroyed critical systems not with precision strikes but with brute force and explosives. Team 3, what's your status? Chen listened to the comm chatter from the bridge. We found something that looks important and we blew it up, came the reply, punctuated by gunfire. Now we're heading deeper. That's not a plan. It's working though, Captain. The Vextharn collective consciousness struggled to process what was happening. These humans fought with no coordination, no strategy, yet they were devastatingly effective. Each Marine acted independently, making decisions that contradicted each other but somehow achieved results. A Russian Marine found the harvester's power distribution center and, instead of trying to shut it down properly, simply planted 3 kilograms of C4 and ran. A Chinese Marine turned a corridor into a death trap using nothing but wire and grenades. A Brazilian Marine led a team that got completely lost in the ship's interior, but stumbled onto a critical node and destroyed it by accident. The Harvester is losing cohesion, Tanaka reported. Its systems are failing across multiple sectors. Recall the boarding teams, Chen ordered. Let's see if these things can adapt to interior sabotage. The Marines extracted themselves from the dying Harvester, some of them literally cutting their way through the hull to escape. The massive vessel began to break apart, its biological systems unable to cope with the random chaotic damage inflicted throughout its structure. The remaining 5 Harvesters backed away, uncertain. Their collective intelligence had analyzed thousands of battle scenarios, but nothing prepared them for an enemy that fought with such apparent disregard for tactics. Chen pressed the advantage. All ships, listen up. She broadcast to the remnant fleet elements racing to reinforce them. Don't engage in formation. Every captain picks their own approach. Confuse these things. Make them guess what you'll do next. 2 Quellan frigates dropped out of hyperspace and immediately separated, attacking from opposite vectors. A Drazen destroyer came in firing energy weapons, then switched to missiles mid-attack for no tactical reason except to be unpredictable. An Architect science vessel, never meant for combat, started ramming debris at the enemy. The Vextharn adaptation algorithm broke down. Too many variables, too many contradictory tactics, too much chaos. They did something they had never done in 200 years of warfare. They retreated. Chen watched the enemy vessels flee into hyperspace. Colony status? Secure, Captain. Minimal damage. They're calling you a hero. I'm no hero, Chen said, settling back into her chair. I just showed them how we fight back home. Bechtel's face appeared on screen again, his expression unreadable. Captain Chen, what you did today was reckless, dangerous, and violated every principle of modern warfare. I know, Chen said. It was also the first time in 200 years that Vexitharn forces have retreated from a battle. Bechtel continued. They fled, Captain. They fled from you. Chen looked at the tactical display, seeing the confused reports coming in from across the sector. The Vextharn were regrouping, analyzing, trying to understand what had happened. They're not afraid of losing, Chen said quietly. They're afraid of not being able to predict. That's what we gave them today. Uncertainty. She stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars. They've spent 2 centuries learning patterns. We just taught them that humans don't have patterns. We have chaos, and chaos doesn't play by their rules. The Council is disturbed by your methods, Bechtel admitted. They should be, Chen replied, because I'm about to teach those methods to everyone. If we're going to beat the Vextharn, we need to stop fighting like civilized species and start fighting like survivors. You're asking us to become monsters. Chen turned to face the screen. No, Admiral. I'm asking you to become humans. There's a difference, but it's smaller than you'd like to think. 3 months after the battle at mining colony Theta 7, the war had changed. Captain Sarah Chen stood in the war room aboard Bastion Station, surrounded by holographic displays showing fleet movements across 17 sectors. But what made Admiral Bechtel's hearts beat faster was not the displays themselves, but what they represented. The remnant forces were winning. Drazen 3rd Fleet reports successful defense of the agricultural worlds, announced a tactical officer. They used the dispersal tactic the humans taught them. The Vextharn couldn't track individual ships. Quellan hive ships deployed biological countermeasures, added another voice. The Vextharn withdrew after encountering weaponized spores. First time we've used biological warfare. Architect crystalline dreadnoughts employed kamikaze drones, came a 3rd report. 70% casualties, but they destroyed a Vextharn command node. Bechtel studied the reports with growing unease. Victory after victory, but each one came with a cost that made his skin crawl. The remnant forces were learning to fight like humans. Dirty, unpredictable, brutal. Captain Chen, he said quietly, approaching her. We need to talk. She looked up from a tactical display, dark circles under her eyes. She had barely slept in weeks, traveling from fleet to fleet, teaching alien commanders how to think like humans. What's wrong, Admiral? We're winning. That's what worries me, Bechtel admitted. He pulled up a display showing a recent Quellan engagement. Look at this. They deployed neurotoxins that caused enemy forces to attack each other. It worked, but it violated the Galactic Convention on Chemical Warfare. That convention was written by people who thought they'd always fight fair enemies, Chen said. The Vextharn aren't fair. Neither are we anymore, Vectel replied. Yesterday, a Drazen commander executed captured Vextharn drones to study their psychological impact on the hive mind. Last week, an architect fleet deliberately destroyed a moon to create debris fields. They didn't evacuate the mining colony on that moon first. Chen's expression hardened. How many casualties? 16,000. She closed her eyes briefly. That's 16,000 dead versus billions if we lose this war. I don't like those numbers either, but that's the math. Is it? Vectel challenged. Because I'm starting to wonder what the difference is between us and the Vextharn if we're willing to sacrifice our own people. The difference is we'll stop when the war is over, Chen said. They won't. Before Vectel could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. Red emergency lights flooded the war room. Multiple Vextharn signatures dropping out of hyperspace, announced the tactical officer, his voice tight with fear. 73 capital ships. They're heading straight for Bastion Station. Chen's eyes snapped to the tactical display. The Vextharn had adapted. Instead of scattering their forces, they had massed them into one overwhelming fleet. They had learned from the chaos tactics and developed a counter-strategy, pure numerical superiority. Time until they're in weapons range, Chen asked. 90 minutes. How many ships do we have in system? 42, Vectel said. Not enough. Even with your tactics, we're outnumbered nearly 2-1. Chen stared at the display, her mind racing. The Vextharn had evolved past the guerrilla warfare tactics. They were betting that humans couldn't fight a conventional battle of attrition. And they were probably right. Get me every ship captain on comms, Chen ordered. Now. Within minutes, representatives from every remnant fleet in the system appeared via hologram. Drazen, Quellan, Architect, and a dozen other species, all looking to Chen for guidance. Here's the situation, she said without preamble. The Vextharn have adapted to our chaos tactics. They're coming at us with overwhelming force, betting we can't coordinate a proper defensive response. They think we're too fractured to fight a conventional battle. They're right, said a Drazen commander. We've spent 3 months learning to fight independently. We don't have unified doctrine anymore. Exactly, Chen said with a grim smile. And that's going to save us. Listen carefully. The Vextharn are expecting us to either run or meet them with coordinated resistance. We're going to do neither. She pulled up a tactical overlay. Every captain will engage using completely different tactics. Drazen forces, you're going to use textbook conventional warfare. Perfect formations by the book maneuvers. Make them think you're the main threat. The Drazen commanders looked confused but nodded. Quellan ships, you're going full guerrilla. Hit and run. Never stay in one place. Be chaos incarnate. Understood, replied the Quellan representative. Architect vessels, I want you to do something completely insane. Turn off your weapons and just defend. Make them waste time trying to kill you. That's suicide, protested an Architect captain. That's trust, Chen corrected. Trust that everyone else will be hitting them while they're focused on you. She continued, assigning different tactics to each species. Some were ordered to use weapons at maximum range. Others were told to fight at point-blank distance. Some were to target engines. Others were to aim for weapons. Some were to use energy weapons exclusively. Others were limited to kinetic weapons. What about the Indomitable? Her XO asked. Chen smiled. We're going to do what humans do best. We're going to make it up as we go. Vectel understood then what Chen was doing. The Vextharn's adaptation algorithm needed patterns to learn from. By ensuring that every ship fought using completely different doctrines, she was creating a battle with no pattern to analyze. The enemy would see dozens of contradictory tactical approaches and wouldn't know which one to adapt to. This is madness, Vectel said. This is war, Chen replied. And war is always madness. We just learned to embrace it. The Vextharn fleet arrived exactly on schedule, their dark vessels arranged in perfect geometric formation. They had studied the human tactics and developed what their collective intelligence believed was the optimal counter-strategy. They were wrong. The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. The Drazen Third Fleet engaged in precise methodical combat, their ships moving in textbook formations. The Vextharn began adapting to conventional warfare patterns. Then the Quellan Hive ships appeared from nowhere, striking at flanking positions with no coordination, each ship acting independently. The Vextharn adaptation shifted to counter-guerrilla tactics. The architect crystalline vessels simply positioned themselves in the way and refused to move, their shields absorbing incredible punishment. The Vextharn couldn't understand why they weren't shooting back. The Indomitable wove through the battle, like a drunk comet switching tactics every few minutes. Chen fired weapons in random patterns, changed speed and direction without apparent reason, and generally acted like someone who had no idea what they were doing. The Vextharn collective intelligence tried to predict her next move, and failed every single time. "They're fragmenting," Yuki Tanaka reported from her station. "The hive mind is receiving too many contradictory data points. Their formations are losing cohesion." "All ships, maintain your individual tactics," Chen ordered. "Don't coordinate with anyone. Just keep doing your own thing." The Vextharn fleet, faced with an enemy that fought in dozens of different ways simultaneously, began making mistakes. They overcompensated for guerrilla tactics and left themselves vulnerable to conventional strikes. They adapted to long-range combat and got destroyed by close-range fighters. They tried to counter human unpredictability and forgot about the other species entirely. For the first time in 200 years, the Vextharn collective intelligence experienced something it had no framework for understanding: confusion. "They're retreating," Vectel said in disbelief. "They're retreating back to their core territories." Chen watched the enemy fleet jump to hyperspace, leaving behind 17 destroyed vessels. The remnant forces had lost 9 ships, but they had won. More importantly, they had forced the Vextharn to adapt to something that couldn't be adapted to: chaos given purpose. "Captain Chen," Vectel said after the battle, finding her in the observation deck. "You taught us to fight like monsters today." "No," Chen said, staring out at the wreckage floating in the void. "I taught you to fight like survivors. There's a difference." "Is there?" "I watched us use tactics today that would have been unthinkable a year ago." Chen turned to face him. "I know what you're feeling. The guilt, the horror at what we've become, I feel it too." She gestured to the stars. "But out there, the Vextharn are regrouping. And if we don't finish this, everything we've sacrificed will be for nothing." "How do we finish it?" Vectel asked. Chen's expression was unreadable. "We take the fight to them, their core territories, their home, and we show them what happens when humanity decides to end something." 6 months had passed since the battle at Bastion Station. The Galactic Remnant Council gathered in emergency session, their holographic forms flickering around the central display. Captain Sarah Chen stood before them, presenting what many would later call the most insane military proposal in galactic history. "Absolutely not," Counselor Thresh said, his crystalline body chiming with agitation. "You want to attack their central nexus? The heart of the Vextharn collective? That's suicide." "It's necessary," Chen replied calmly. She gestured to the tactical display showing a Dyson swarm around a neutron star, deep in Vextharn territory. "Intelligence confirms this is their core consciousness, the central node that coordinates all Vextharn forces across the galaxy. We destroy that, we win the war." "With what force?" Admiral Vectel asked. "Every military simulation shows we need at least 500 capital ships for a successful assault. We have barely 200 in the entire remnant fleet." "I don't need 500 ships," Chen said. "I need one. The Indomitable." The council chamber erupted in protest. Voices in a dozen languages spoke over each other. Vectel raised his hands for silence. "Captain Chen, please explain how one ship can accomplish what our combined fleets cannot." Chen pulled up a new display showing the Vextharn adaptation patterns over the last 6 months. "Look at this data. Every time we engage them, they learn. They've adapted to guerrilla warfare. They've adapted to conventional tactics. They've adapted to chaos. But their adaptation algorithm has one critical flaw." "Which is?" Counselor Mirage asked skeptically. "It needs contradiction to break down," Chen explained. "We've been teaching you to fight with maximum unpredictability. The Vextharn have been learning to expect unpredictability. So now we do the opposite. Yuki Tanaka stepped forward. I've been studying their collective intelligence for 6 months. Their adaptation algorithm is incredibly sophisticated, but it's based on pattern recognition and counter-pattern development. If we approach their nexus using perfect textbook tactics, traditional military doctrine with no deviation, their system won't know how to respond. That makes no sense, said a Drazen admiral. You just taught us that predictability is death. Against a learning enemy, yes, Chen agreed. But the Vextharn have spent 6 months learning to counter unpredictability. They've evolved their entire strategic framework to expect chaos. Classical military doctrine will confuse them more effectively than any guerrilla tactic could. You're betting the fate of galactic civilization on this theory? Thresh demanded. I'm betting on it because I know I'm right, Chen said. But if you don't approve the mission, I'll take the Indomitable and go anyway. I didn't come this far to let fear stop us now. Vectel studied the human captain. In 6 months, she had transformed the remnant forces from a dying alliance into a fighting force that had pushed the Vextharn back system by system. She had lost weight, aged years and months, and carried the weight of thousands of deaths on her shoulders, but her eyes still held that predator's gleam. If you do this without authorization, you'll be court-martialed, Vectel said. If I do this without authorization and succeed, you'll have no one left to court-martial, Chen replied. The Vexitharn will be gone. The vote was closer than expected. In the end, the council refused to authorize the mission. Too risky, too insane, too likely to fail and lose their best ship in the process. Chen left the council chamber and walked directly to the Indomitable's docking bay. Her crew was already preparing the ship for departure. They said no, didn't they? Her XO asked. They said no, Chen confirmed. We're going anyway, no one protested. Her crew had followed her into hell for 6 months. One more trip wouldn't hurt. The Indomitable departed Bastion Station without clearance, jumping to hyperspace before anyone could stop them. The journey to Vextharn core territory took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of preparation, drilling in traditional naval tactics that most of the crew had never used before. It feels wrong, complained a Marine during training exercises. Fighting by the book, following doctrine. This isn't how we win. It's exactly how we win, Chen replied, because they won't expect it. The Indomitable dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Vextharn Nexus system. Sensors immediately detected thousands of defense platforms, orbital fortresses, and patrol vessels. The Dyson swarm around the neutron star pulsed with eerie bioluminescent energy, the physical manifestation of the Vextharn collective consciousness. They've detected us, Tanaka reported. Multiple vessels moving to intercept. What are they doing? Chen asked. Nothing. They're just watching, Chen smiled. They're analyzing us, trying to predict what crazy tactic we'll use next. Helm, standard approach vector. Maintain formation. All weapons powered but not locked. The Indomitable moved through space like a ship from a training manual. Perfect velocity. Textbook positioning. Classical military doctrine executed flawlessly. The Vextharn vessels shadowed them but didn't attack. They're confused, Tanaka said, studying the enemy response patterns. Their adaptation algorithm is searching for the trick, the trap, the unconventional tactic. They can't process that we're fighting normally. Keep going, Chen ordered. Maintain course. For 3 hours, the Indomitable flew straight toward the Nexus, following every rule of traditional warfare. No evasive maneuvers, no random course changes, no unpredictability. The Vextharn collective intelligence struggled to understand. This wasn't how humans fought. This wasn't the chaos that had defeated them for 6 months. They didn't attack because they couldn't predict what would happen if they did. We're approaching optimal weapons range for the Nexus, the tactical officer reported. Prepare the payload, Chen said quietly. In the Indomitable's cargo bay, a single data core sat primed and ready. Tanaka had spent 3 months preparing it. Not a weapon, not a virus. Something far more dangerous to a learning algorithm. Information. Launching payload in 3, 2, 1, Chen counted. Away. The data core streaked toward the Dyson swarm, broadcasting on every frequency the Vextharn collective used. It contained something that no other species had thought to use as a weapon. Human history. Every war. Every tactic. Every strategy. Every doctrine. 10,000 years of human conflict compressed into one massive data stream. The Vextharn collective consciousness, designed to learn and adapt, absorbed it all, and broke. The adaptation algorithm tried to process the information. It attempted to calculate counter-strategies for every tactic, defenses for every weapon, responses for every doctrine. But there were too many. Thousands of contradictory approaches, strategies that canceled each other out, tactics that made no logical sense but had worked anyway. The Vextharn collective intelligence encountered something it had never experienced in its entire existence. Paradox. How do you adapt to a species that fought with spears and nuclear weapons? That used cavalry charges in cyber warfare? That employed total war and limited engagement? That fought for resources and ideas and revenge and honor and territory and religion and freedom, and 1,000 other reasons that contradicted each other? The nexus is destabilizing, Tanaka reported, her voice filled with awe. Their collective consciousness is fragmenting. Different nodes are deploying contradictory defensive strategies. On the Dyson swarm, Vextharn vessels began attacking each other. Some adopted defensive postures. Others went on the offensive. Some tried to flee. Some charged forward. The hive mind, confronted with the totality of human warfare, couldn't decide which response was correct. All of them were correct. None of them were correct. The algorithm collapsed into recursive loops. Time to go, Chen said. Get us out of here. The Indomitable jumped to hyperspace as the Vextharn nexus tore itself apart. The collective consciousness, unable to reconcile 10,000 years of human military history, fragmented into millions of independent nodes, each following different tactical doctrines, each contradicting the others. The Vextharn didn't die. They simply stopped being unified. The Indomitable returned to Bastion Station 2 weeks later. The council was waiting, half ready to arrest Chen, half ready to celebrate. Admiral Vectel met her at the airlock. The Vextharn are scattered, he said. Intelligence reports they're fighting amongst themselves across every sector. Their unified threat is over. I know, Chen said, looking tired beyond measure. You disobeyed direct orders. I know that too. The council has decided to court-martial you for insubordination, Vectel continued. They've also decided to award you the Galactic Medal of Valor, the highest honor we can bestow. He paused. You'll be tried and decorated in the same ceremony. Chen laughed, a sound that held 6 months of exhaustion. Sounds about right. They walked together through the station corridors. Around them, personnel from 17 species worked side by side. No longer desperate survivors, but something new. Something united not by culture or biology, but by shared struggle. What will you do now? Vectel asked. Chen stopped at a viewport, looking out at the stars. Go home. Earth still has problems of its own. Wars that need preventing. People who need protecting. She glanced at Vectel. What about you? What will the remnant do now that the war is over? Rebuild, Vectel said. Remember, learn. He clicked his mandibles, and what humans had learned was a smile.